As we have read the penultimate and just in your imagination also the last portion of the book of Leviticus, we have again combined two Torah portions together because this is not a leap year, and so we need to read right through the year the 54 Torah portions as they were divided, as the Torah was divided at the time of the rabbis. The penultimate Torah portion, Behar, is all about faith and trust in God, as well as re-emphasizing our commitment to deal justly with one another as human beings. God tells Moses to instruct the people in the laws of the sabbatical and jubilee years, as well as how to relate to those in the community who became impoverished. Bechukotai, as the last chapter of this incredibly complex but interesting of the books of Moses, and as mentioned a few weeks ago, the first to be taught to children, is in contrast to the previous portion, as it tells us in a terrifying manner what will happen to us if we do not keep God's commandments. It is here we read about the curses that may befall us if we betray God's divine mission. It is to keep us in check as people, not in terms of restricting our freedoms of action, on the contrary, to let us know that we need to be people of God, which means practicing justice, mercy, compassion, and understanding. By then, as we start to tremble and fear what can happen, we are then given a glimpse of the divine mercy and consolation. In the same way as we know we are given the opportunity in the days of the 10 days of penitence between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to atone for what we have done, and not so much against God, but against our fellow human beings, realizing and always keeping it in our heads that our freedom of action has a price, and also reward as long as we are able to be prepared to keep our humanity as part of our lives. It is our behavior and our attitude which matter, because circumstances and history sadly repeat themselves. We read in the book of Ecclesiastes, which a school of thought believe was written by King Solomon in his senior years, a kind of reference to history, which is a set of eternal recurrences. What has been, will be. Nothing ever really changes. What has been, will be again. What has been done, will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. On the other hand, we know from reading the Hebrew Bible that there can be change in the affairs of humankind. All societies, whilst different, nevertheless, it is what we do as human beings which is important and which either brings about change, whether it be through violence, goodness, justice, or mercy. We can see this from looking at the history of nations. For example, the world witnessed several revolutions, just to mention a few: the English, the American, the French, and the Russian. They all brought changes, but with different outcomes and with varying degrees of violence. In America and England, these revolutions brought war, but which eventually led to a growth of civil liberties, human rights, and governments which more or less represented the nation and brought about what we call today democracy. On the other hand, the French Revolution gave rise to the Reign of Terror, in which more than 40,000 of those who opposed the revolution were executed by guillotine. The Russian Revolution led to one of the most repressive totalitarian regimes in history. As many as 20 million people are estimated to have died unnatural death under Stalin. in the period of his rule of 30 years. In revolutionary France and in the Soviet Union, the dream of utopia ended in the nightmare of hell. I sometimes ask myself, if we were to have a revolution today, would the aforesaid nations behave in the same way? Who knows? And on reflection, let us not try this either in practice or even in imagination. As I read and immerse myself more and more in Jewish history, I'm aware that in spite of the Hebrew Bible and the ethical teachings of Judaism, we as a people, as Lord Samuel said, are no different as any other human being, but more so. And that we, as much as others, are capable of unspeakable things. I'm reminded of a book I read a few years ago called Lahava Belev Europa, Flame in the Heart of Europe, published in 2004, which is about a Jew called Bela Kun, a Hungarian journalist and an army officer who established the first communist republic outside the Soviet Union. His 133 days in power were turbulent and eventful, to put it mildly. He ruled between March and August 1919. The book was written by Ben-Tzur, a former Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and the author traces Kun's biography from his birth in 1886, a small village in Austro-Hungarian monarchy. Bela Kun, at the age of 18, became Kun and started to write for the national newspapers in Budapest. He was strongly left-wing and also harbored Hungarian patriotic and nationalistic feelings. The book skillfully deals with the Machiavellian machinations in which Bela Kun's Soviet Republic took power. Bela Kun's dark past and the republic he formed are the demons which still haunt the Jewish people of Central and Eastern Europe. Kun and his pro-communist Hungarian Jews brought terror and bloodshed, which may have contributed, as Ben-Tzur refers, to the latent anti-Semitism of the then Hungarian society, particularly during the Nazi period. There's also a description of the demise of Bela Kun, who was eventually executed by whom no less than Stalin, who could not stand someone so doggedly adhering to Lenin's teachings and principles. Bela Kun was remarkable, and the book captures this in his courage to speak his mind and stick to his own principles, but at the same time, it speaks openly about the Jewish henchmen who were no different to the commissars of the Soviet Union or indeed the servants of the fascist regime. Just as an aside, the communist leader of Hungary was somebody called Mátyás Rákosi before 1956, also born as Rosenfeld. Another of deputies to Kun, and whose rule from 1945 until 1956 was one of the most oppressive regimes in Central Europe. To return to the original thought, what has been will be, nothing ever really changes. What has been will be again. We have to stop things to happen again. We as individuals and as a society need to watch how we behave and what we do, as we shall be judged by history, which we know comes and goes in cycles. And so the successes or the disasters of various elections that took place in our country in the last day or so. The politicians and we all should remember that we have been placed on this earth to do good, to do kindness, to be merciful, and to be just. And that we have the power both to do evil, but also to do good. Let us try to do good. And as we go from strength to strength, and of course the sound of the organ brought back that we are getting back to whatever the normality of today is. And so as we progress, let us also progress as individuals, as human beings, and as society. Amen.